consultants in organizational behavior and structures, or organizational structure and behavior. We actually advise on the impact individuals, groups, structures, and processes have on behavior within organizations and within society. And our responsibility to our clients is to ensure that that organizational behavior or that impact to society is beneficial to both the organization and the society they serve. So that's why we're here, and that is what we help our clients in. And the topic of discussion today is the ease of doing business within and with African countries. We all bring biases to any situation. Every time we say we have experience, we're just confessing to our biases. We think we know how things work. Half of the time we are right, and half of the time we're not. Because things don't always work the way history tells us they work, or even not history, perception, or experience, or somebody's reported experience. Because although all people are the same, all people don't react the same way in the same situations. So if one person had an experience doing business in Kenya, it doesn't mean the same person will have that experience doing business in Namibia, or the same person will have the same experience doing business in Morocco, or will have the same experience doing business in Nigeria. Nigeria is a large country. It's got over 200 million people. With a population of 200 million, we have different kind of people, different kind of businesses, and like any population, there'll be good people, there'll be honest people, there'll be dishonest people. So it's up to the person doing business, or up to the regulator or policymaker advising people to do business in a country or with people, to just let them know that to be cautious, to be warned in advance that human beings are unpredictable, and there will be good people, there will be trustful people, there will be people who put on the front as if they are bad people when it's just generally protecting their vulnerability, and there are other people who wear gloves, velvet gloves in an iron hand, and there are those who wear an armor over a soft arm. So you have to be able to understand that. And the African continent, like any other continent, which is occupied by human beings, has a spectrum of people. Our responsibility here is not to say Africa is a continent of angels, but to say it's not a continent of devils. There is an attitude that assumes the best character in some places and the worst in some places. What we're saying is that you do not gauge a country by the worst that can happen there, or you do not gauge a country by the worst that can happen there. Because in all these countries, the worst can happen and the best can happen. But it looks like when we are dealing with Africa, when we're dealing with African countries, we judge them by the worst that can happen. And when we're dealing with Europe or Western countries, we judge them by the best that can happen. So I was looking at a picture of a Bible, and the Bible that has been issued and used in Kenya for a long time. You can see the presentation, the graphic presentation of Africa is of a drought-stricken continent of hungry people, while the graphic representation of Europe is London. When the person who really took the picture, you could see the bias of the editor. His mental image of Africa is drought-stricken, hungry people, while the typical African country is just a country like any other. So, but I think that the mental image that people want to present, if you are to depend on charity, or rather charity, the charity is your objective, then you need to present the continent as if it's a charity case. And if you have to present a country as if it's ready to receive investments, then you have to present it as if it is investment ready. What I am here to say as an advisor in social behavior is that African countries have gone past that time when they have to depend on people to donate $20 through the TV to be able to do some productive work. And it's also lucky that there are more sources of resources internationally. So those people competing for the ability to do business with Africa may have to change their local perception, because if you have to invest a teacher's pension fund money into a place, and the teachers have this perception that Africa is not an investment place, it is a charity case, then you can't invest that fund there. When everybody knows that there are investment opportunities in Africa, and African economies are growing faster than most, but because the public sentiment in the West has been socialized to think that African countries are charity cases, it's impossible for investment managers to take retirement savings of teachers, of health workers in their countries and invest in their country, because the owners of the money have not been educated enough to know that those African countries are investment grade and not charity cases. So things that look simple and harmless, like presenting a country as if it's a charity case, reporting news from a background of a shanty town. Just that those things that create a norm that makes people or the audience feel that African countries are charity cases. It makes it more expensive, or not even more expensive, it makes it impossible for pension funds to invest money there, because the perception and the public sentiment is such that they think that would be a loss if they invested money there. So the individuals and the groups that originally created that norm or that perception or that sentiment need to go back and revise it. And listening to some people in authority, even starting from our former president, who called African countries shithole countries, which I think maybe it was out of ignorance and pride. But given that local US education does not give international exposure to ID, people are only bound to believe their influencers. And if the influencers haven't taken care of their biases, or if they don't have the knowledge, then the relationship between African countries and the US or the Western countries will continue to struggle. Not because the people who want to trade, who want to do business want it to struggle, but because the local bank manager does not have that information, and he goes by public sentiment or public perspective, which is based on things that are not true, but which are promoted by an industry that has an interest in keeping an image of charity, so that we can put an advertisement on TV every day, and pensioners can give $20 to support starving Africans, then we have a problem. So I think that the charity industry need to ease off a little. I know, like any other place in the world, because I have lived in the US for the last 20 years and I've worked. I haven't lived here as a diplomat, I'm an American. So I do understand that we also have challenges here. And I grew up in Kenya. I worked there over 20 years. I know there are challenges there, but I don't think that presenting the worst of Kenya and the best of the US, or presenting the worst of Uganda and the best of US, the worst of South Africa and the best of the US, or the worst of Morocco and the best of the US, it creates an imbalance, although in reality value is created by perception. So since value is created by perception, if we can be able to present the worst of others and the best of ourselves, we can devalue their resources and overvalue ours. But it's an untenable situation when there are other players in the marketplace. And when information is flowing, there was a time when the US had two versions of, say, Business Week had the local version and the international version. The international version would show the best of the US to the international audience, and the local version would show the real thing, and or the real thing will stop at water's edge. But with internet and an educated population overseas, a not educated, curious population outside overseas, and given the population in the US, I think that we need to find a way to make sure that we are telling the truth about ourselves and the truth about the other people, and not demonizing. It's not demonizing when it is not demonizing when you find the worst person in a particular place and decide everybody's that, and then you find the best person on one side and you expect everybody's that. It's not demonizing. It's just because your typical person, your typical client, your typical company, say the typical company in the US would be the best of the companies, and the typical company in Kenya would be the worst of them. So basically, you are penalizing the good players in Kenya because of the bad guy, but you are giving credit to the bad players in the US because of the good guy. What I'm saying is those biases need to be eliminated, because they will hurt the US businesses in a sense. Because if it were only the US businesses that were in the marketplace, and then they were using the worst case scenario in Kenya to judge all companies, and then they used the best case scenario in the US to judge all the companies, and then of course they would devalue all the resources, all the competencies in Kenya, and get value siphoned out of the country. But since there are other players, and since information is moving transparently, and having a curious population overseas, which goes beyond the curtain, goes beyond the curated stories that are told by gatekeepers, I think that it's disadvantageous to businesses and organizations in the US, and even to the people in the US who don't have time to be able to find out, to research about countries, if we say that of the overseas people are not as good as us, or they are worse than us, and then of course the overseas people find out that we are not as good as we said, and they work very fast work out that they are not as bad as they were told. So I'll say, for an example, one time I had a business deal with a US company down in Florida, and they are nice people, but their perception of where I was going to take the merchandise wasn't true. I told them that I'll be back in a month, but they had looked on a map and realized that shipping from Mombasa, I was going to go inland for about 200-300 miles, and their information was that there are no roads in Kenya. So according to them, me telling them that I'll come back in a month, I wasn't telling the truth, because they thought I needed that month and more to be able to work the merchandise back to wherever I was taking them. I was offended. The African in me was really offended. I wanted to push back. But the businessman in me told me, well, I can take advantage of this situation. I can tell them, yeah, I know, I understand. In fact, that's why I need a discount for transport. If you can be able to give me a little discount on the transport, so that I can be able to see how whether I can be able to work out for that. That way, I would get the people to discount their goods because of their ignorance, and my reasoning was that education is expensive. So that is a one-time gain, but overall, the perception will continue. So it's something like that, and if every African business person has to make that calculation, I think that it is something that American businesses have to think about. And having worked here and lived here for this time, I think it's the responsibility of policymakers in all these government organizations to familiarize themselves with the countries that they work with or their businesses would like to work with, so that they can be able to tell them how it is actually on the ground. So I strongly recommend that, like other dual nationalities in the country, I've seen the Chinese work with the American companies to work in China. Russians work with the American company. Russian Americans work with American companies work in Russia, or something like that. I've seen that happen. Israelis work with American Israeli Americans work with Israeli Americans work with American companies working in Israel. I think it would be a good business practice for businesses, even after they have dealt with the government agencies, to seek out African, Kenyan Americans, Zimbabwean Americans, Namibian Americans, if they want to go into Namibia, say, or Kenyan Americans if they want to go into Kenya, because these people are comfortable in the US, anywhere in the US, and they are comfortable anywhere in Kenya or anywhere in Namibia. And they comfortably wear those two hats. They comfortably think like Americans, and they comfortably think like Kenyans. And that duality is a good quality to go for if you want to deal in those countries, particularly if you are native-born American and you only can think like an American. I know a few years ago it used to be like, it wasn't a badge of honor to be able to speak another foreign language in the US, and everybody would say speak English. But I think that has waned a little, considering that everybody now understands that the US population is only 5% of the world population, and 95% population lives outside the US, and they speak languages other than English, or rather American English, because even English in UK is different from American English, which most Americans do not know. So it is good business practice for American companies to identify a specific African country they would like to do business with, and then seek out in the market Americans who originated from that country, who can be comfortable in that country, or who can be able to put on a hat of that country and think like those people think. Because empathy, the ability to see yourself in your clients will help you navigate the market better. And what is better than having somebody who has the ability to think like you and also to think like the other guy, the other client in the country you're going to. That will eliminate this feeling that since for a long time it has been advantageous to the world to think the worst of Africa because it helped raise money for Africa, or rather, it helped money to be spent in the name of Africa. It was beneficial for people who could contribute money to think that Africa was the basket case and they needed to contribute money. So that narrative was promoted. It served its purpose, but of now the purpose is over, is out, is done. The Africans are people like any other. They have internet, they have TV, they have highways, they don't live on trees, and they want the same things that American people want, and they have the money to spend. So I think that, and also they have a population that's younger, that's growing, and a growing population means a growing market. A growing population means available workers. An educated population means available, educated employees. And with those kind of resources, American companies need to be able to first find a market for their goods, second, find the workers to do the works, and find the workers to do the research, to do the marketing. So you cannot do those things if your shareholders think the location is not appropriate because they vote you out or they fire you if you something like that. So that perception, the management of the perception of the African countries need to change, and needs to change because it's in the interest of US companies as well as in the African countries. I will continue talking on this subject until everybody hears me out. It is in the interest of the US to have a public perception that African countries are investment grade and they are not risky and they are not expensive. First, expensive is dependent on public perception because the rates, the insurance rates you charge depends on whether you think your money is repairable. So if you think it's not repairable, obviously you charge expensively. And if you think 20% of the people won't pay you and you load the 20% back on the people who pay, obviously your goods will be expensive. But if you are the only person in the market, you can do that. But if you have another competitor in the market, and then people find out you're doing that, then your friendship will weaken. So I think that I need to hear what people have to say about this, but it is my view that the US entities, the US Commercial Service, Exfam, the US Trade and Development Agency, and all the other US agencies that work to promote international trade have to make sure that they are professionals understand that we all bring biases in life. And the more experience we have, the more biases we have. And our experience may serve us well most of the time, but it will not serve us well some of the time. And if in a situation of flask, new perspectives may need to be put on for those people who worked in an area in the era where Africa was a charity case. They might find it very difficult, or who were trained or who interned with people who were taking care of Africa as a charity case. They might find it very difficult putting aside the biases by the experiences and realizing that the mental image they had of African countries has completely shifted. Like if you go, if you are the mental image you have of Rwanda, when I say Rwanda, if your mental image is of a massacre that happened a few years ago, you will not be having the right image of Rwanda. Okay? You need to go there right now. You need to see what the people have done with their country. And you need to understand that they learned and moved on and developed their country to the extent that it is one of the best countries to do business with in the world. So the experiences we may have had 20 years, 30, 40 years ago may not serve us well right now. So what I'm asking you is question your experience, question your biases. When you think about Rwanda, if your mental image is of massacre in Rwanda, maybe you need to do a refresher course. When you think about Somalia, which we exceeded for a long time, and everybody's image of Somalia is of bombs and people throwing bombs around, but really, if a Somali American goes to he sees a very different Somalia. So if you want to do something in Somalia, maybe you want to go to Minnesota, where there are a lot of American Somalis, and find somebody there who will go into Somalia, and you will be amazed at the mental image they have of Somalia other than the one you have now. So I think that in all the things, as we formalize friendshoring of our industries here, we also need to look at the cobwebs in our experience, in our heads, and the mental images we have, and make sure that they are right, particularly if we are policymakers, or if we are makers like newscasters or broadcasters, something. Sometimes something as simple as going to book yourself in a Sheraton hotel in Nairobi, but then anchoring from Kibera. It looks simple, but the audience that receives the report thinks that you are lucky to escape the Nairobi because it was such a bad place. So the presentation of our stories, where we present them from, and we know it, the people who do those kind of things know what they're doing. They know they want to make a statement that, okay, I slept in Sheraton, but I need to tell the world that this place is a dump. So those kind of actions by policymakers, by makers, need to be. It would be okay if those actions were benefiting the U.S., but they are not. They are not now. Right now, they are not. They are not benefiting the U.S. at all. So I think it's in the interest of the U.S. to ensure that we present our friends in the best light, just like we present ourselves in the best light. And if we present African countries in the best light, we'll find that we have a lot more friends to work with than presenting them in the worst light and still wanting to work with them, because people remember how you make them feel, not what you do or deal or work with them. So remember that. My name again is Dr. David Frederick Amakobe. I'm a business consultant in organization structure and behavior. I advise people on the impact individuals, groups, structures, and processes have on behavior in their organizations or in their society, and the behavior of norm makers and policy makers in US organizations to frame Africa as a risky, expensive place to do business, but it's good for charity, need to stop, because it's hurting the business of the US and those countries. Thank you very much. I will see you again